that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. This is Tom Fennell, the famous world traveler, and I am George Harvey. And every day I get up at about 3:30, 4 o'clock and start looking at the news. I spend a couple of hours, 2-3 hours, looking at news articles that I get by searching using web searches. And I usually
you get a bunch of them, I tell you.
I get a bunch. I usually look through about 300 articles a day.
That's believable.
I have been doing this for almost 1,000 consecutive days.
Okay.
So I've looked at a bunch of
Your head is
articles.
full of stuff.
And I have a good memory, and it keeps me awake at night. What can I say? Anyway, I want to start off. Tom and I go through I put my articles up on a blog, geoharvey.wordpress.com, and and Tom go through the articles that are the ones that are picked as the 20 or so best of the last week and discuss them on BCTV's show. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of fun doing it. And today, instead of starting out with that list, I want to start out with something that came in the news today because I think it's that important. The news media in general ignored it. I didn't find it anywhere except Clean Technica. But this
I wonder why.
Well, you know,
We'll
wonder
find out
why.
soon.
Wonder why? It's because the media can't deal with this. But here it is. I'm just going to read this. This is from Clean Technica today, which is Thursday, the 19th of February.
So we'll deal with this again next week.
We will deal with it next week in depth after you've had a chance to read it. The U.S. Navy reacts to a blockbuster Rolling Stone climate change story. And it says, we've spilled a lot of ink on Defense Department efforts to call it the climate action now, attention to climate action now, and the gloves are really off. Go to Facebook and find Navy Task Force Energy. And right up top, you'll see a link to last week's Rolling Stone blockbuster climate change article, complete with the incendiary title, quote, "The Pentagon and Climate Change, how deniers put national security at risk." Lest you think this is just a link, the Navy's climate post starts off with a forceful declaration in support of the Rolling Stone article. It includes the subtitle, quote, "The leaders of our armed forces know what's coming next, but deniers in Congress are ignoring the warnings." And it caps that off, end quote, after warnings. And it caps that off with a rather dramatic and kind of terrible illustration from the publication. The screenshot looks like trawlers. Look at this. It looks like trawlers with World War II battleship turrets on them. It's not exactly the modern Navy. I would put it up for the people here, but we'll do it next week.
Yeah, we can get it next week.
And then it says, if you can't find the post on Facebook, here's how the Navy teases the Rolling Stone link. Climate change is not only a threat to the environment, but a threat to our national security. Coastal military bases and U.S. Navy missions on the high seas are at risk. Military readiness could be compromised by these environmental changes. Read about the challenges the Pentagon faces posed by climate change. That was a quote from the Navy.
We will be touching base later on this morning on a couple of bases that have gone renewable down in Florida.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Military bases.
Yeah.
They know what's going on.
Yeah, but the thing is, these articles are saying national security is being put at risk by 190 people in Congress. And you know what? 190.
Wow.
And you know what it reminds me of?
It's just an article of faith.
That's right. It reminds me of the guy who said there are 57 communists in the State Department, except for one thing, and that is, science agrees with the Navy. This is not a joke. This is not a ploy. It's not some kind of political football. This is real.
Well, it is very much so. But these guys depend upon getting elected by people who don't believe in climate change.
But you know what? And we talked about this last week. I think it was last week. You can tell me if it's this week and I got it wrong. 98 senators voted that climate change was real.
Yes.
One voted against it. That was
one
last
didn't
week.
Vote.
Yeah. And do you suppose they knew this was coming?
I think so.
I kind of think so. So anyway, that is that as far as that is concerned. So we should jump off. I also want to read something that comes out of Green Energy Times. So we're going to have to go kind of fast through a lot of this.
I can't figure out which way to put it.
Yeah, well, you got to put it up in front of you, Tom, because you're not on television. There it is, Green Energy Times. And I'll put it, should I do it now or should I do it on the 15th? Because it came out on the 15th.
Mention it briefly now and we'll revisit it.
I have a goodbye tribute to the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant.
Well, that's a good.
Yeah,
that's a good one. We ought to have a party.
Well,
I think we have already.
I'll read the tribute. I'll read it in whole if you want me to.
If it's real short.
It'll be 5 minutes. Okay, starting Thursday, February 12th, Apple Incorporated will buy about $850 million worth of power from the new California solar farm to cut its energy bill. A lot of money to cut your energy bill. The first solar ink plant with a capacity to power the equivalent of 60,000 homes will be used to supply energy for Apple's new campus in Silicon Valley and all stores and offices in the state.
This is something.
This is big.
It's a lot.
That came from the Christian Science Monitor. What do you have there? That's a picture of
This is the same thing,
solar.
yeah.
Okay.
This came from that article, and I don't know where that particular solar array is.
Yeah.
But it did come out of that article.
Right.
So the roofs look like California.
It might be a believable picture.
And why they're doing it is economics.
It's economics.
As they say, we have a
Absolutely.
fixed price for the renewable energy, and there's quite a difference between that price and the price of brown energy.
Yeah. Yeah, and
so it's economics.
It's
and these
economics.
guys know what they're doing.
They are spending $850 million to get less expensive energy from solar panels.
And they're getting publicity out of the whole stunt.
Well, they are indeed, but it's not entirely a stunt. Okay.
They are going to receive 130 megawatts of capacity out of a 150 megawatt solar plant.
Wow.
So they're getting almost all of it, and they got a 25-year purchase agreement.
Wow.
So they're set for a while.
They're set for a
Because
while.
one thing that's going to happen is the price of fossil fuels will be going up.
It will indeed.
And the price of sunlight will not.
No question about it. Okay. Proceeding. Albany Times-Union. That article came from Christian Science Monitor, but now we're doing Albany Times-Union. New York is looking at new energy laws and might consider emulating Vermont's cow power program. The manure from half the cows in New York could provide power for 45,000 homes. Capturing and utilizing this methane is equivalent to eliminating carbon dioxide emissions from about 120,000 cars.
Well, I had trouble with this one. They wanted they wanted me to sign up.
Oh yeah.
Get a subscription.
Oh well.
And I tried to go around it and find the article somewhere else, and it's nowhere else. But I did get this picture of cows, and they are Vermont cows, and they are producing cow power.
Well,
these cows are.
These cows are actually producing power going on the grid.
In Vermont.
In Vermont. Okay, and they're probably powering your home. Okay, next, from northescambia.com, Gulf Power filed a petition asking Florida's Power Service Commission to approve an agreement that would make the utility a leading purchaser of wind power. There ain't no wind power in Florida to speak of, among Florida utilities.
But the wind is in Oklahoma.
There you go. The project, called Kingfisher Wind, would be sited in Oklahoma, where conditions are favorable for wind energy. There you go.
89 wind turbines, 180 megawatts, enough energy to power approximately 50,000 homes.
Yeah.
Quite a stunt.
Yeah, isn't it quite a stunt? You know, there's...
And I just mentioned this a couple of minutes ago. Part of this deal is Gulf Power is a utility. They announced in January that the utility is partnering with the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force to build solar energy farms.
Yes.
At 3 different facilities in Florida.
Yeah, don't you love it?
And that's Eglin Air Force Base in Fort Walton Beach, Holly Field in Navarre, and Softly Field in Pensacola.
Well, there you go.
They know what's going on.
They know what's going on. Okay, we are up to Friday, February 13th. Google is partnering with Next Era Energy to power its Googleplex headquarters at Mountain View, California. Beginning in 2016, Google will receive approximately 43 megawatts from wind plants at the Altamont Pass. This is important.
This is one of the very first wind farms in America.
Yeah, and it's a place that's held up as a demonstration of how wind turbines kill birds.
Yeah, where the birds are all dying.
But as part of the deal, 370 old turbines will be replaced by 24 new ones.
Yeah, 24 is going to do the job of 370. That doesn't seem to make sense, but it does.
It does, because
the old ones
turbines,
are small.
Yeah.
Lattice work structures
that birds like to
the
nest
birds
in.
like to nest in. And, they're archaic. These things are what? They're 50 years old, I think.
Are they really? Amazing. But nevertheless, it means that this is going to be an environmental improvement, I think.
Google also is on top of things here.
Yeah.
It's new technology. They got a lot of bright minds there.
Yeah.
They're looking at this stuff.
Yep. That's from Green Tech Lead. But our next item is from Hellenic Shipping News Worldwide.
Yeah, you get these things from all over the place, don't
Yeah.
you? Hellenic means Greek.
Yeah, it sure does. And this is not the first article I've had from that organization. European utilities shut more coal and natural gas power plants in 2014 than in any year since at least 2009, amid falling demand for electricity and tougher pollution curbs. European Union power companies turned off 63% more coal and gas-fed generation than they started. Net decommissioning was 5 gigawatts.
So they started some, they turned off some, and the ones they turned off is 63% more than the ones they started.
Yep.
Well, it's a step in the right direction.
It is. Yep. And our next item, coming from Tech Hive, Tesla's crusade against fossil fuels will soon hit home with battery-powered energy pack. This I really like this one.
Yeah, there's a picture of one of them up on a...
Oh yeah, there it is.
That mounts on the wall.
It mounts on your wall next to your
like in a garage.
Yeah.
In a basement.
I was going to say next to the unit that you use for heating your home with heat pumps.
Air source heat pumps. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, that would make sense.
Bloomberg reports it will reveal more details in a month or two, and I've been seeing the details on this dribbled out. Backup power is one application, but there are a lot of others, and one of the applications for this, of course, is evening out your power supply so that you can benefit from buying power at night when it's cheap and supply it with yourself during the daytime when it's expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is one of the benefits of smart meters. Smart meters were put in at least partly to enable this kind of stuff.
And one of the things that's interesting about this is that it means that the homeowner can invest in a battery for his own purposes, and one of the beneficiaries of this is his utility. So this is important.
Because he's not buying power during the peak hours; he's using his own.
That's right, and the utility can use some of his during the peak hours because he's willing to sell it during the peak hours.
If he wants to sell it, he can make money too.
So there you go.
A win-win situation.
It's a win-win situation. Okay, the next one is from February 14th, Saturday. Leaders of the UK's 3 main political parties pledged a cross-party fight against climate change. David Cameron of the Conservatives, Ed Miliband of Labour, and Nick Clegg of the Liberal Democrats agreed to quote, seek a fair, strong, legally binding global climate deal which limits temperatures rises to below 2 degrees Celsius, end quote. That is from Renews. And if you think I believe these guys for a minute, you can think again.
It's good publicity, though.
It's good publicity, and it's something that they really need to do.
Well, they're saying the right things, so some of that is likely to stick because somebody's going to remember what they said.
Yes, and one group of people who are likely to remember who they said are young people who are facing the effects of climate change much more than us old geezers. Okay, our next item. This is from phys.org. You might have something to say about this. Inverter load rejection overvoltage tests completed by the U.S. DOE's National Renewable Energy Laboratory as part of a cooperative research agreement with Solar City have proven so successful that a testing partner, Hawaiian Electric Companies, has proposed to double its hosting capacity for solar electricity.
Well, I was confused a little bit by this, so I decided to try and figure it out. So what they're talking about is load rejection overcharge is when the power output from distributed energy systems exceeds the local
demand. Yeah.
And that can cause trouble. It can result in overvoltage. It can result in things popping here and there. So they try to reject that. And that's what these devices are doing. They're rejecting it. Well, they got a little smarter device now that's rejecting it sort of step by step.
Oh, good.
Okay, so that the net result is they can accommodate about twice as much remotely generated electricity as they were.
Yeah.
Now, Hawaii Electric is...
Hawaii Electric is really peculiar in terms of...
Well, this is falling right into their lap.
Absolutely.
Because they've had a lot of problems with exactly this.
They've had a lot of problems, and it's because they're an island.
Yeah.
And they don't have their own resources to speak of. They have some, but not anywhere near enough, and the resources they've got are almost entirely renewable. They don't have any coal or oil.
Well, because of this new technology, or new twist on existing technology, Hawaii Electric has increased the amount of electricity they will let their customers generate that they'll buy back.
Right.
To double. They basically doubled
it. That's a very interesting...
120% of minimum daytime load to 250% of minimum daytime load.
Okay. Wait a minute.
Now that we've confused you.
Yeah, right. From what to what?
120%.
120 to 250.
To 250%.
Okay, so they will allow 250% of the minimum daytime load.
Yeah, which is going to vary wherever you are.
This is just a number that.
It's just a number. Yeah.
Okay. Our next that came from phys.org. Our next article is from Capital New York. New York ratepayers will subsidize operation of the Jinnah nuclear power plant, by golly, near Rochester, under terms of an agreement with the plant's operators, Exelon. The Jinnah nuclear generating station will be allowed to charge customers above market rates until 2018 because the plant has been losing money.
Well, we've talked about this a couple of times before.
Right.
And the problem is, yes, the plant's archaic, it's losing money.
Yep.
But there isn't the infrastructure for them to import enough power to replace it.
Yes.
And by the way, I put this picture up. This is a picture of the Jinnah plant.
Oh, good for you.
And the reason I put the picture up is a great picture.
Yeah, it is.
I don't mean that the plant is great, but the photography is wonderful.
Yeah.
With the clouds and the
that
shading.
That almost looks like an artist's conception.
I thought it was, and I looked at it close, and it's not. It's a photograph.
Wow.
It's a good one. Let's pull up a little bit more about what they're saying here. With this plant, there's grid reliability.
Right.
Without this plant, there isn't grid reliability, and as I said, they can't import enough power to balance it out. So they're going to get a year and a half or 2 years to get their act together.
Right. And during that year and a half or 2 years, you can bet there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be looking very hard at how to replace that plant.
Oh, exactly. That's the whole purpose of it.
A lot of anti-nuclear activists who are going to be saying, let me put solar power up on my roof.
The plant is licensed till 2029.
Right.
But this agreement expires in 2018.
Yes.
And I would put my money that they have it resolved by 2018.
My bet is that it will not be. They will not be able to keep the plant going after 2018.
I wouldn't bet against it. I'm sure exactly that's going to happen.
That's from Capital New York. Now we're up to Sunday, January 15th, and January 15th was the day that Green Energy Times came out. And just in case anybody missed it before, there is Green Energy Times. And if you don't mind, I would like to read an article I wrote, which is on the cover.
Alrighty,
Which
let's
is called Goodbye Vermont Yankee. And it says, this is by George Harvey, that's me. The reaction of some to the final shutdown of Vermont Yankee nuclear plant was predictable. One national investment publication focused on the factoid that Vermont had lost 70% of its electric power. Notice I said factoid. Factoid is something that looks like a fact, but likely is not. And by the way, I did the calculation at the end of the time, before they started ramping down to shut off, they were actually providing about 61% of the power that was generated in Vermont. Or less, but at least it was
of the
was
power
not,
that was generated in Vermont.
at the time
Not
they started
necessarily
ramping
being
down.
used in Vermont, but generated.
Right.
The electrons were being used, but somebody else was paying
Well,
for it.
we in Vermont have been replacing Vermont Yankee with, well, I'll get to it in this article. Vermont was never supplied, Vermont Yankee never supplied the state with 70% of the power it used. It produced about 70% of the power generated in Vermont, but it also always sold most of the power out of state. At one time, the amount purchased in Vermont was about 35% of the state's needs, or about 1,950 gigawatt hours per year. Recently, the state found that other sources were less expensive, and none of the power used in Vermont was purchased from VY. The story of where Vermont does get its power is getting more interesting and more exciting with passing time. Back in 1997, Vermont started pursuing distributed renewable power when it passed its net metering law, which allowed consumers to produce power for the grid. This got the state off to a start and made people more aware. Then in 2005, the state adopted its sustainably priced energy development program, which is called SPEED, which is open to many different kinds of utility-independent power plants. Over the years, it has come to include 15 biodigesters, the greatest number in any state. It also includes solar farms, hydroelectric projects, wind farms, landfill, methane plants, and biomass plants. They range in size from tiny to utility scale, and tiny is tiny. Plants in the SPEED program are owned by a wide variety of companies, cooperatives, farms, schools, organizations, and households. But even in combination with net metering, they do not represent all of the renewable power installed in Vermont in that time. Renewable generation owned by utilities is not included in either program. It is easy to find out how much power is generated under the SPEED program by visiting the webpage vermontspeed.com/project-status. The 70 or so projects produce over 892 gigawatt hours per year. If we guesstimate net metering at about 50 gigawatt hours per year, the combined output of the two programs is 940 gigawatt hours per year. When Vermont Yankee shut down, Vermont's SPEED and net metering programs had already replaced nearly half of the power the state once got from the nuclear plant. It might be useful to make a few observations about this. First, detractors in distributed and renewable power love to point out that the wind and power systems are intermittent. Truth be told, all sources are intermittent, and utilities have always had, expensive backup systems for baseload plants. The real question should not be whether we will have power if we depend on renewable resources, but how much backing them up will cost. It turns out that backup power for distributed renewable systems is far less expensive than backup for baseload plants. It's about a third as much. Baseload power plants are inflexible in their output and have to generate power when nobody wants it. If somebody doesn't use it, something gets burned up. Selling power at a loss or even at negative prices. By contrast, wind turbines can be shut down easily, and solar plants produce power during the daytime when power demand is highest. Third, wind and solar power pricing has dropped to the point that our least expensive power is from wind, and solar is nearly tied with gas for second place. Projections are that the prices of wind and solar will continue to decline, and those of gas, coal, and nuclear will keep going up. Fourth, solar and wind power both have the advantage of costs that approach zero once the initial investment is paid down. This makes it easy for project costs to project costs over a period of decades. This is not true of baseload plants, which are subject to changes in supply. Fifth, local communities can use distributed renewable power to form microgrids that can continue to produce power in storms and other times of emergency when the grid goes down. Sixth, distributed renewable power sources can be locally owned, keeping profits in the local economy, benefiting local businesses and households. They can provide more jobs than baseload plants and reduce taxes. I believe we have more than replaced the jobs from Vermont Yankee already.
You think so?
In the solar industry.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Seventh, renewable power generation does not produce waste. Even accounting for greenhouse gas emissions from construction, they are our cleanest power sources. Eighth, distributed power sources require less investment for building and maintaining than expensive power grids, and I'm speaking here of the grids themselves, transmission lines. Whether we like nuclear power or not, Vermont Yankee has shut down at last, and we can say goodbye. But as we see the advantages of renewables, we can add, thanks, but we don't need you anymore.
You know, it's an interesting point that you went through there that we just don't think about. We think about having standby power for renewables. We don't think about having standby power for baseline.
Isn't it great?
And they're always running. And they're very expensive. And we're not using any of their power unless something breaks.
That's right. It's called spinning reserve.
Yeah.
And it's like the price on the wholesale market for their power is usually about 25 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay.
I mean,
that's expensive.
It's expensive power. It's half again or more what is paid for retail. So the wholesale costs more than the retail by 50, 60%.
So they're losing money right off the bat.
Right off the bat, you're losing
money. But at
money.
least they're keeping their promise to their customers.
They're keeping the promise to the customers. And we should point out that's their job. And that's all factored into the normal prices.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, we're moving along right here.
Moving along, and this is a good one that I think you like.
This one here, well, start off.
Okay, peakprosperity.com, and it is an opinion piece. Arthur Berman, why today's shale era is the retirement party for oil production. Don't you love that title?
I do, yeah.
Podcast guest Arthur Berman, a geological consultant for 34 years of experience in the petroleum exploration and production, sees the recent U.S. oil production boost from shale drilling as short-lived and somewhat desperate.
Well, he added to that sentence a kind of last hurrah before the lights get turned out.
Yes.
By the way, I'd love to hook into this podcast, but it's about an hour long.
Oh my gosh.
And it would take up the rest of the show.
All the show.
I have a link to it, but I'm not going to put up the link because it's going to take you about an hour and a half to write the link down.
Okay.
But I recommend listening to this podcast because this guy's pretty smart and he's an insider.
Right.
He's an insider. He's right down there in the middle, and the best way to get it is Google Peak Prosperity.
Or just go to peakprosperity.com.
Go to Peak, and then Google Arthur Berman.
Okay.
You probably won't even have to do that because it's on this week's show.
Yeah.
But it's worth watching. It's about an hour, and it's worth watching, and this guy knows what he's talking about.
That's good.
Let's see, what am I?
Basically,
I've got one takeaway from that.
Yeah, do that.
This is a quote from him, I believe. Yeah. He's talking about wanting to export oil while we're still importing oil. But what in the world is a country like ours doing, still importing 5+ million barrels of crude a day, and we've got maybe 2 years of supply from tight oil? What are we thinking about when we claim we're going to export oil? That's just a dumb idea. It's like borrowing money from a bankrupt person.
Yeah.
So look it up. Look it up, guys.
Okay.
Back to George.
Our next one here is from India.com. Indian Prime Minister Modi inaugurated the first renewable energy global investment meeting on the first day of the 3-day event that they had. 293 companies committed to set up plants to generate 266 gigawatts of renewable energy within 5 years, while banking major SBI will finance at least 15,000 megawatts of that.
It sounds like the investors of India are behind this guy.
Well, not just India, but all over the world.
Yeah, some of these are not in India.
Yeah.
But they're doing wonderful things in India.
Yeah. 266 gigawatts of renewable energy.
That's a lot.
Is a lot. I mean,
That's probably as much as the rest of the world combined right now.
if you figure that at an average capacity factor of 0.3 and nuclear at 0.9, then that turns out being about 53 gigawatts of nuclear power, which is the equivalent of about 53 nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
And this is going to be put online in 5 years.
Yep.
And this is a financial commitment these guys have made.
That's what it looks like.
And
The bankers are behind him.
This is absolutely mammoth. That's a huge amount of power.
Well, he's doing a lot right in India. He's bringing it from the 19th century to the 21st without stopping at the 20th.
I think that's true.
And what he says, and this comes from the article, that's describing India's thrust toward renewable energy production, which is happening, we've talked about it, as an effort to ensure universal energy access for India's poor.
Right.
Modi
300
said
million
India-
people, by the way. 300 million
Yeah,
people.
there's a lot.
There's a lot of these people who've got no electricity.
Modi said India has graduated from megawatts to gigawatts in terms of renewable energy production. Well, that's just a different way of saying what I had just said.
Absolutely it is.
The fruits of development will not reach the common man until energy reaches every last household in the country. Well, it's basically true of the world.
Yeah, I think it is.
In this age of globalization, we have no option but to make a quantum leap in energy production and connectivity.
Right.
He's saying the right thing, and he's doing the right thing at home.
I go into the web searches that I do in the morning.
Yeah.
And ever since this article appeared, I see something come up about another 10 gigawatts going up in India, and
Somewhere
I
in
just ignore
India.
it. I just ignore it because it's not significant.
We've got another one we're going to talk about here. It's the biggest one in the world.
And it's like, if I saw something 1,000th of that size happening in New England, it would certainly go in.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, well. Okay.
The next one is interesting.
Okay, the next one is from Bloomberg. The White House has backed solar and wind power projects and touted the benefits of the country's surging production in natural gas, which burns about 50% cleaner than coal. That's arguable. Still, the largest source of electricity in the United States. It had backed clean coal, but now the U.S. DOE is beginning to withdraw that support.
Well, what this is all about, and there's a picture out there, it's an artist's conception of what this plant was supposed to be. It's an old coal plant that's been retired.
Yes?
They were going to rehab it, bring it up to snuff, and then capture all the carbon, run it 60 miles away, and bury it underground.
Yes, where it can leak.
Where it can leak. Yeah. Well, they didn't say that, but
They
that
leave
was the
some of the
concept.
details out.
That was and there's something to be said for what they're thinking about doing. I don't think they got all the bugs ironed out, but they're moving in the right direction. Sequestering this carbon is, I think, a good idea. It's going to help solve the problem we're in.
Yep.
I don't think this is the way to sequester it, but
No.
there will be some technology that does, and I think it's going to turn the carbon dioxide into rock, into calcium carbonate.
Well, honestly, Tom, I'm going to disagree with you about that. I think they are going to come up with something, but I think it's going to not turn it into rock.
Turn it into fuel.
It'll turn it into plastic.
Well, okay, yeah.
You know.
If they can make fuel, they can make plastic.
Right.
Basically, plastic is just solid fuel.
That's right. It's true. It's true. The whole thing about carbon, and it really disturbs me that they would think about burying carbon, because it will leak. And even
Very
where they
likely
say,
to leak.
you know,
How are they going to keep it down there?
well, one of the things that they say is, well, if you put it in a mine and the mine is full of water and you put it down at a certain distance, or
It's
if you put it in the
carbonate the
ocean,
water.
no, when you put it in the ocean and you put it in a big bag,
Yeah.
where it can't get into the water,
Yeah.
it will liquefy. It takes about 6 atmospheres to liquefy carbon dioxide.
Okay.
You know, when you have a carbon dioxide fire extinguisher and you pull the thing, all that white stuff comes out.
But it's liquid in the
It's liquid in there. It cannot maintain itself as a liquid
under atmospheric conditions.
And when it comes out, it's decompressed, so it gets very cold, and it turns to dry ice. It's 100 degrees plus below zero, perhaps. But the thing that bothers me is this is kind of like sequestering nuclear waste. From Echo RI News, which I think
this is a Canadian-related story.
Yes, it is, which I think is Economy Rhode Island. One thing energy companies leave out of their talking points for expanding pipelines in New England is an effort to deliver natural gas to Canada for export. Developers are already moving to send natural gas through Massachusetts to Nova Scotia, where it would be converted to liquefied natural gas and exported. This makes me, my mind is boggled by this. Why don't they take the Canadian natural gas and send that to Nova Scotia and bring the natural gas that they're talking about bringing up to go to Nova Scotia instead to Boston?
I think there's a simple answer to that pipelines are in the wrong place.
Yeah, right. That's what it is.
This picture is interesting because if you look at it, you see the pipeline in red, you think that that's what this article is all about.
Yeah.
And sort of it is, but it's not a new pipeline. That's 40 years old.
Oh, okay.
And they've been bringing natural gas from offshore, from Saudi Arabia, from wherever, the Emirates.
Right.
And they've been bringing it to this little island off the coast of Nova Scotia. It's right there.
Okay.
And they unload it there. That's a big natural gas terminal.
Okay.
And then underwater, the equivalent of, it's a submarine pipe, if you will.
Okay.
They bring it on shore, and they bring it down that orange pipeline into Boston.
Is that orange pipeline really orange?
Probably. Well, now what they want to do is reverse flow of everything.
Of course.
Bring natural gas from the Marcellus Shale, which, by the way, by the time they get this finished, there isn't going to be any more Marcellus Shale.
I think that's probably true.
But they're going to bring on gas from the Marcellus Shale into Boston, run it the other way through this pipeline.
To Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia, out through that undersea cable, to undersea pipe to the island.
Where the
and
ships
they're going
will
to
pick it up.
export it from there.
Now you've explained it to me. I understand.
It's nuts. It's really nuts.
Yeah. Well, the Marcellus gas is not available in New York anymore.
Pretty much.
And
well, it's not because of the governor stopped it.
And now I'm
there's
seeing
not
more
much
and
left
more
in Pennsylvania.
effort in Pennsylvania to close it down forever. And of course, there are people in Pennsylvania who are they're like, we thought this was going to bring prosperity to us, and all it's brought is wreckage. Anyway.
But the interesting thing about this is they're not being honest with us.
Yeah.
What they're saying. They're trying to tell everybody this pipeline is to bring gas into New England to heat it in the wintertime, when in reality, they want to export it.
Yes. Okay. All right. We're up to the 16th of February, which is Monday. China raised its total grid-connected solar power capacity to 28.05 gigawatts in 2014, up 60% for the year.
Up 60%, yeah.
For the year, and aims to raise the total by more than half this year. So it'll be 60% in 2014 and another 50% on top of that. Okay, the figure is equivalent to about 2.1% of China's total power capacity of 1,360 gigawatts at the end of 2014, while wind power is about 7% of the total.
So it's still a drop in the bucket, isn't it? Even though there's a great increase in building, it's still only a little bit.
It's a drop in the bucket for now, but 10 years from now it could be.
It's going to be big. They're moving in the right direction.
And as a matter of fact, their totals are exceeding the totals of the United States, which brings us back to the climate deniers. Not only are they jeopardizing American security, they're putting us behind China and India. And 20 years from now, when the Chinese and the Indians look at their power bills and say, well, that's not really a bill because there's no cost to it. It's just a tax. So it goes to the government, or it's a profit that goes to a company without a payout. And the United States will be paying out, and we'll know where it's going too. It'll be going to Koch Industries.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Now we're going back to India.
Okay. India is, and that was from Business Recorder. This is from IndiaTVNews.com. India is all set to have the world's largest solar power plant in the Rewa district of Madhya Pradesh. It will be completed next year on Independence Day. The 750 megawatt plant will be constructed and operated as a joint venture between the state government and the Solar Energy Corporation of India. It will occupy 1,500 hectares of land.
That's Indian Independence Day, by the way.
That's Indian Independence Day, that's right.
There's a picture, and the picture is not of this one because this one's going to be bigger than that.
Okay.
This is going to be the biggest one in the world.
Okay.
And Madhya Pradesh is right smack dab in the middle of India. It's
Okay.
sort of India's Missouri.
Okay, that's good. All right. And
And it's going to be on 4,000 acres.
Okay.
4,000 acres. I can't even put that into square miles.
4,000 acres?
Yeah.
That's about 20, well, a square mile is 640 acres.
Yes, it is. That's right.
So 4,000 acres is 4,000 divided by 640.
Whatever that number is.
You know, but it's not huge.
Well, it's pretty darn big. It's bigger
pretty
than
darn
Brattleboro,
big.
that's
It's
for
not,
sure.
It's not taking up, well, but just think of the amount of power it's producing. Okay. Should we move on?
Yes, we shall.
Okay. Tuesday, February 17th in Geneva, Switzerland, just 3 weeks after the U.S. Senate voted 98-1 that climate change is not a hoax. The first round of the 2015 United Nations talks among 194 nations produced the first ever universally agreed negotiating text on how to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius, which is 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, above pre-industrial temperatures, this according to Clean Technica.
Well, most of this at this point in time is mostly talk.
Mostly
But they're talking.
But they've come to an agreement.
Yeah, they have.
On the basis of which they can come to a vote later this
It's
year.
not binding, but
Yeah.
they're talking about
Yeah.
it, and somebody's going to hold their feet to the fire.
I think
eventually.
Yeah. Yep.
This comes from the article. If we continue at our current rate to burn fossil fuels that release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, the world may literally be cooked. That's not an exaggeration. It's kind of scary, but it's if we continue doing this.
You know what it reminds me of when you say it's not an exaggeration is cooking cheese.
Is what?
Cooking milk to
Yeah.
make cheese.
Yeah.
When you make cheese, I've done this. When you make cheese, you come to a point where you cook the curds.
Okay.
And you make curds and then you cook them.
Yeah.
And cooking them means that you bring them up like 1 degree every few minutes until they've
Very
been raised
slowly,
up
huh?
to the temperature of 86 degrees or 90 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Yeah, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which is warm to the touch, is
Yeah.
cooking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I will agree with you. Okay, should we go on?
We shall go on.
Okay, from the
This is an interesting one.
Yakima Herald Republic to store power in Washington State solar and wind generators, the Klickitat PUD has begun applying for a license from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to pursue a pumped storage project, which will cost an estimated $2.5 billion. When completed, the project will have a capacity of 1,200 megawatts.
1,200 megawatts. That's
But-
really not huge.
It's not huge, but it's twice as big as Vermont Yankee,
Yeah. Yeah. Which isn't huge.
which isn't huge. But that's
But it's
12
interesting. This is like what they've got down there in Northfield.
Yeah, that's right. Which
They,
is not 1,200, but it's 1,080. It's just a tiny bit smaller. It's 90% of the size.
Okay. Okay. So we've talked about this before, and it's
Yeah.
a clever idea. Is they're buying electricity when it's cheap, using that electricity to pump water uphill, and then pumping it downhill and selling the power that's generated, which they get more money for.
Yeah, because
So
they do
while
it during peak
it costs
demand
them
time.
more energy to get the water up there than they recover when it comes back, it's been being sold for so much more that it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
So maybe it's only 80% efficient, but money-wise, they're making 200-300% on their money.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. It's a giant storage battery.
It's a giant storage battery. It's a 1,200 megawatt storage battery to back solar and wind. So solar and wind are intermittent. So what? You know, so what?
Everything's
and
intermittent.
the one that
really.
we've got here in Northfield, Massachusetts, will back up solar and wind just like this one in Washington State.
Exactly.
But the one in Massachusetts wasn't built to back up solar and wind. It was built to back up nuclear.
Well, this article goes into that. It talks about the number of pump storage plants throughout the United States, which is not very large.
Yeah.
And virtually every one of them was built near a nuclear plant.
Yes.
For the very purpose of sucking up the nuclear energy.
Yeah. Nuclear is not intermittent. Come on. Okay. Our next item is from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Solar power brought 3,500 new jobs to Nevada in 2014. I'm sorry, Nevada. I shouldn't make fun of those people. A 146% increase over 2013 that pushed the state to the #1 position in the nation in solar jobs per capita.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and who did it edge out in that competition? Do you know?
Huh?
Who did it edge out in that competition?
No, I don't know.
Vermont.
Okay.
According to a report just released by the Solar Foundation, it ranked Nevada 7th nationally with 5,900 total solar jobs in the solar industry. It's 7th in terms of the total number, but it's #1 in terms of the jobs per capita.
Yeah.
And I don't know that Vermont is #2. It might have fallen below that, but Vermont had been #1.
This is interesting because they're reasonably decent jobs.
Yeah, they are. They're decent jobs.
Yeah. These guys are making enough money to support a family climbing around on a roof.
Yeah, and an ordinary family with a guy with ordinary education. He doesn't have to be a nuclear engineer to do that.
He doesn't have to be a PhD or anything like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, this is ordinary guys that are willing to walk around roofs.
That's right. Okay.
And they get paid a premium because it's a dangerous job.
That's right. And if
It's
they're-
interesting, this picture. These are real guys, they're not actors. And in the article, they mention them all by name.
Oh, okay.
But I forgot their names. I didn't think it was really important.
I forget names too.
But they are real guys, and this is real jobs. And
the only names that I remember really well are people that I'm really my favorite actress, for example. I remember her.
Who's that?
Sylvestre Latouzle.
You're going to have to go into a little bit of an explanation there.
Sylvestre Latouzle is a real person.
Yeah.
She comes from the island of Jersey.
Okay.
In Channel Island.
Yeah.
And she has appeared in a number of films and so forth, TV specials in the UK.
Uh-huh.
In 30 years ago or so, she appeared as the star actress, lead actress in a production of Mansfield Park, which is a Jane Austen novel turned into this thing. She played Fanny Price. I thought did a pretty good job in a pretty bad publication. But recently, she starred in another, I think it was a BBC presentation of another Jane Austen thing where she played, I forget the woman's name, but she was she was in a show of Northanger Abbey, and she played an older woman, obviously. And I think she's a good actress, and I enjoy watching her. But it's the name I love.
There's a woman in town, I don't remember her name.
Yeah.
She's a writer for a major magazine publication,
Okay.
like Newsweek or something
Okay.
like that, you know. But she also writes locally.
Yeah.
And she has a connection to Jersey.
Okay.
And she's constantly writing about Jersey. She loves Jersey.
Really?
Yeah.
I was on Jersey once.
Were you?
Yeah, I was on a plane that went from Orly Airport to Exeter in England, and it landed on Jersey. And it was one of the very few prop-driven planes that went in and out of Orly Airport.
Uh-huh.
And it was a DC-3 to Jersey.
Okay.
And then
DC-3.
DC-3, and then in Jersey, I was supposed to transfer to a DC-4.
Okay.
The DC-4 is the one that had that thing going up, that ramp going up the tail.
Okay.
and the DC-4 was taking off. I saw it happen just as the DC-3 was landing.
That's
so I
cool.
wound up spending about 10 or 12 hours on Jersey at the expense of the Jersey Airlines, which gave me dinner. Isn't that nice? I was 15. Okay, our next one is from Web India. More stuff from India.
More stuff from India. This
Okay.
is an interesting article.
This is Wednesday, yesterday.
This relates to the
February
one we
18th.
just talked about.
It sure
really.
does. The 3-day first renewable energy global investor meet and expo, which they call Reinvest, concluded on Tuesday with commitments to 266 megawatts of, 266,000 megawatts of renewable power, including 1,000 megawatts from state-run NTCP. This makes the takeoff conference toward revolutionizing India's energy sector. In other words, the previous article that we talked about, that was talking about what they were doing, and this is just talking about what it has done.
Well,
They've got the
apparently,
commitments.
you see up there a kind of a, well, it's a commitment. It's a document.
Yep.
And these people all signed those documents to the extent of 266 gigawatts of energy.
Which means the
It's a
country of
commitment now,
India
you know,
can
this
go to
is-
the bank and say, we need a loan in order to build this thing,
Yeah.
and the bank will say, sure.
Yeah.
You know, unless they don't have the money. That is just plain huge.
So
It's
things are
mind-boggling.
moving around the world, really.
Yeah, they are. Okay. From AOL, we got this. Fires continued to burn for hours Tuesday after a train carrying 109 tankers of crude oil derailed in a
this
snowstorm
is another tragedy.
alongside a West Virginia creek, threatening the nearby water supply. Cars carrying volatile Bakken crude from North Dakota's shale fields had left the tracks on Monday afternoon, and 19 caught fire, and a few of them exploded.
Yeah.
And again, we're like that situation that happened in Canada where a large number of people were killed because a train derailed and the crude oil exploded.
Yeah.
This is fizzy crude, it's
This
called.
picture there is after the fire's gone out, and it shows how twisted the rail cars were.
Yeah.
It's
well,
not a very good picture. Some of the other pictures in that article showed the flames everywhere. And they had to just let them burn till it burned out. They couldn't put the fire out.
They couldn't put it out. Yeah. And you know, this is one of the problems with Bakken crude oil. And you know, as I think about it, when you have a pipeline, you know, the pipeline that they're proposing for shale oil is Keystone XL is huge. I mean, huge in diameter. And that means that it's going to hold a huge amount of oil, which means in turn that if there is a break in a fire,
That's going to be huge.
that's going to be huge because that oil is fizzy and it's going to be pushing gas out through the break.
Yep, yep. And the fizz is not carbonation, it's gas.
It's methane mostly.
Yeah.
Okay, that's sad, but you know, that's something to
Well,
avoid.
the one good takeaway is this: no other injuries were reported. There was some smoke inhalation. That was it. Nobody got physically hurt by
Yeah,
this.
they were lucky. Now they've got another problem too, and that is a whole lot of oil went into the water supply, and they don't know. The last time I heard, they had tested the water supply, and it had not yet been contaminated, but they had no reason to believe that it would not be. So I don't know what to say about that. Okay.
This
and
is the last article. on
last
the-
article on the
Yeah.
list. We've been doing a lot today. vtdigger.org. I think we can comment on this too. In Vermont, after 3 weeks of deliberation, the House Natural Resources and Energy Committee voted 10-1 to pass H40, a bill requiring utilities to sell renewable power. According to the bill, 55% of a utility's electricity must come from renewables such as wind, solar, or hydro, or there's a bunch of other sources, by 2017. That's only a couple of years
Couple
away.
years. And
70
3/4 of it by 2032.
Yeah. And one of the things
It
that's-
also says some of this electricity must come from in-state generation sources.
Right. Well, we're developing those in-state generation sources.
By the way, this is just a bill. This is not a law yet.
It's not a law,
Okay,
but it's going to the
moving
House.
along, and it looks like it will pass.
Yeah. I will be very surprised if this fails to pass, and I expect that it'll be passed in a similar bill will be passed in the Senate, and the whole thing will go to the governor, and the governor will sign
Governor
it.
will sign it, yeah.
And you know, I read this law, and it almost looks like it was saying, here is what Green Mountain Power has done, and we want the other utilities to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And the fact is, the other utilities, a lot of them already are
doing this stuff already.
You know,
yes.
and in fact, we could go further and say Burlington Electric is already getting 100% of its power from renewables.
I think Washington Electric Co-op is way up there too.
I shouldn't say all, because I don't know that it's all, but a bunch of the Vermont utilities are very close to these targets already.
Absolutely.
So I think that it's reasonable to think that this law will pass. It is not opposed by Green Mountain Power, as far as I know. In fact, I think Green Mountain Power is supporting
They're
it.
probably pushing it. Yeah.
And
well, it's right up their alley.
It's right up their alley. Absolutely, it's right up their alley. And this is an important. It's an important thing for Vermont.
Well, because Vermont doesn't have a massive coal burning plant, such as they exist in places like New York and Massachusetts, these many smaller utilities. There's a lot of small utilities in Vermont.
I think there's 18. I might be wrong.
I mean, they have gone their own way.
Yes.
They weren't forced to buy power from the Niagara Mohawk, if you will,
Yes.
of Vermont.
Yes,
Green Mountain Power or Public Service didn't have it to sell.
that's right.
So they weren't pushing it down their throats.
Yes.
So these guys went out and said, well, look, you know, we got a little river here. There's a dam already there. Let's put a turbine in, you know.
Yep.
And now they got access to the renewables, which they didn't have 50 years ago.
You know,
and they're looking at it and they're saying, this makes sense.
Right. One of the things that we've talked about, and I have been pushing hard whenever I can, is microgrids.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that
An excellent idea.
Green Energy Times, again, writing in Green Energy Times in this issue, there's an article about a young woman named Lori Bard, who's a...
I know of Lori Bard.
Do you?
Yes.
She's an interesting
She's
woman.
a hydro person.
She is a hydro person. And she supplied me with some information, which was that there are 149 dams in Vermont. Mm-hmm. This is talked about in the Green Energy Times article. 149 dams that are there that could have power take...
The dams are there already.
They don't have power facilities,
Correct.
but they could.
Yeah.
So
Right up here in Townsend.
the permitting for these things is very simple compared to the permitting of a major dam or even a minor dam. And
Well, yeah, you don't have to mess with the water.
yeah, you don't have to mess with the water.
That's been done already. It was done mostly by Uncle Sam, who had the big stick.
A lot of these things are flood control dams.
Oh, they almost all are.
And so it's a matter of a community in many cases saying, well, why don't we just take this thing, you know, which means buy it, or it means just they already own
Rent
it,
it,
or rent
lease
it,
it.
or lease it, or whatever. Put in the facilities, put in hydro, and get our microgrid or power, or a lot of our microgrid power from that hydro.
Well, that is happening.
Yep.
And Lori is one of the people that's making it happen.
She's got a dam that she's selling power in New Hampshire. She wants to sell power to some kind of community
Yeah,
or whatever.
Gorham, is it? Or
I don't remember the
yeah,
town.
I read
It's
about
in the, it's
it.
in
I
the
read
article.
about it in your article.
Oh,
yeah.
did you really?
Yeah, yeah.
So you've been reading Green Energy Times. Wow. No wonder you know about Lori Bard. Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that happened was I saw this figure from her, and I thought, is that real? And then it said that the capacity of these dams was estimated at 430 megawatts. That's a lot of power.
Oh, absolutely.
And I thought, okay, what's the capacity factor of hydro? And it turns out it's around 45%. So I said, okay, 430 megawatts would give us a third of the output of Vermont Yankee. Right there, like that.
Bingo.
And that's what we used to get from Vermont Yankee.
And these flood control dams, which, by the way, were intended to control floods down in Massachusetts and Connecticut.
Yeah, well, we don't begrudge
which
that.
used to be enormous. I mean,
Yeah.
you could go down in downtown Hartford where the insurance companies are. Way up there near the second floor, there's a line on a building, you know, high water 1928.
Oh, yes.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So these dams were built for a reason.
Yeah.
And they're working.
Yep.
They're working. They impound the water during the spring floods. This is when these floods were happening. Impound the water when the snow melts.
Yep.
And release it slowly.
Right.
And they're on both sides of the river. Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. There must be 20 of them.
Well, there's
And there's other type dams on other rivers for similar reasons.
Well, Tom, I regret to say this, but we're at the end of our hour.
17 seconds left.
We'll have to say goodbye. We will be back. I promise you.
We shall return.
We will. We shall return if we can. If we're alive, we'll get here somehow. Bye bye.
Adios, people.
We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die.